Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak to Bill C-31, the Conservatives' first bill to implement Budget 2014. And yet again, it is another massive omnibus budget bill of over 350 pages and 500 separate clauses. Mr. Speaker, I will not be supporting this bill because it fails to address the very real challenges faced by the middle class. Moreover, it does little to help Canadian youth find jobs at a time when there is persistently high youth unemployment and underemployment. Today, there are still 264,000 fewer jobs for young Canadians than before the economic downturn. The bill does little to help middle-class parents and grandparents make ends meet and tackle record high levels of personal debt. Today, the average household owes a record $1.66 for every dollar of disposable income. Mr. Speaker, a few weeks ago, we had 2 weeks in our constituency offices. 80% of my meetings were with people who were unemployed and looking for work. These were skilled people, engineers, lawyers, and PhDs, and there was one young man who had just graduated nursing. Unfortunately, he could not afford the $500 for the exam, and as a result could not work in the field for which he had studied so hard. Mr. Speaker, I cannot be clearer. People in my community have education, they are skilled, they are desperate to work, and they cannot find jobs. Instead of the government putting new programs in place, support services are being cut in my Etobicoke North community. I've gone to the Minister several times on this issue for both settlement programs and job programs. Mr. Speaker, during those past 2 constituency weeks, we needed to get weekly food programs for 5 families. They did not ask for the help, but I realized the need when I reviewed their resumes, saw the last time they worked, and the number of family members they needed to feed. I had 4 individuals ask for counseling to deal with their depression as a result of not having a job, and 1 talked of suicide. Mr. Speaker, I will bring up one more case. A refugee woman, 18 weeks pregnant, who bled through the night. She was afraid to go to the hospital because she could not afford the health care. And now she is afraid of getting an ultrasound because she cannot afford to pay for it. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' changes to Canadian society do not happen in a vacuum. They impact real Canadians who are hurting. The government needs to learn to see the hurt and to respond. Mr. Speaker, our community is seeing real economic challenges. The government seems out of touch when it talks about this recovery as if it were a uniform recovery that is affecting and helping people in all regions of the country. The reality is there are groups that are simply being left behind. A lot of families are struggling just to get by. Mr. Speaker, I have university graduates who come in to get help after being out of school and out of work for 2 years. I have grandparents who come on behalf of their grandchildren, the first in the family to graduate from university and college, asking why they had fled their country of origin to come to Canada, the land of promise, so their children could have an education. Now they have an education, they still do not have a job. The people in my constituency need jobs, and I've worked hard to get them jobs. In fact, I obtained funding for a Completing the Circle program, a $500,000 job program in our community. I personally review and edit resumes late into the night, sometimes doing 2 and 3 drafts. We get our people into jobs programs. We follow up with them to make sure their job searches are going in the right direction. And while they search, we help them with food, clothing, and whatever other supports they might need. We should all remember we have seen a 31% increase in food bank usage since 2008. At critical times, I've personally bought bedding, food, furniture, and medicine to help hurting Etobicoke North families. We had one lady come looking for help. She was in agony due to an ear infection that had raged for 3 weeks. She had pus and blood running down her face. Sad reality is she could not afford antibiotics because she could not find a job. I have MS patients who can't take their drugs because they cannot work. How many more stories are there like theirs? Mr. Speaker, what I was looking for in the budget implementation bill, first and foremost, was real help for the people of Etobicoke North for jobs. Instead, we have over 350 pages with 500 separate clauses. Once again, my constituents are saddened by the fact that this is an omnibus bill with multiple sections that deserve full and proper hearings in committee and full parliamentary scrutiny. Bill C-31 includes numerous measures that do not belong in a budget implementation bill. For example, rules about food safety, hazardous products, rail safety, and even the number of federal judges. The bill continues the Conservatives' battle against openness and transparency by weakening requirements to consult and inform Canadians about safety regulations and user fees. Mr. Speaker, these changes have nothing to do with the budget implementation bill and are meant only to limit debate on important issues to Canadians. The Conservatives chose this anti-democratic route in order to adopt the bill's measures quickly and to avoid having them reviewed by Parliament. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have repeatedly abused Parliament by ramming through outrageous omnibus bills. For example, a few years ago, the government introduced an 880-page omnibus bill, a grab bag of bills that the government wanted to pass quickly. In fact, it was half the entire workload of Parliament from the previous year. As a result, the government was severely condemned for turning the legislative process into a farce. More recently, the government introduced Bill C-38, the 400-plus page omnibus budget implementation bill. Through the bill, the government sprung sweeping changes on our country, affecting everything from employment insurance, environmental protection, immigration, and old age security. None of these changes were in the Conservative platform. They were rushed into law by, and I quote, an arrogant majority government that's in a hurry to impose its agenda on the country, end of quote. Mr. Speaker, the government's actions reek of hypocrisy. In the 1990s, the Right Honourable Member for Calgary Southwest criticized omnibus legislation, suggesting that the subject matter of such bills is so diverse that a single vote on the content would put members in conflict with their own principles, and that dividing the bill into several components would allow members to represent the views of their constituents on each part of the bill. The Right Honourable Member is now using the very tactics he once denounced. It is a shame that he changed his tune when he was elected to the highest office in the land. Mr. Speaker, one newspaper previously stated that omnibus bills are, and I quote, a political sleight of hand and message control, and it appears to be an accelerating trend. These shabby tactics keep Parliament in the dark, swamp MPs with so much legislation that they can't absorb it all, and hobble scrutiny. This is not good, accountable, transparent government, end of quote. Mr. Speaker, in this omnibus budget implementation bill, Bill C-31, parliamentarians are being asked to consider measures including compassionate leave, expansion of the adoption expense tax credit, medical expense tax credits, and sickness benefits. We would actually be supportive of these measures as individual measures. But unfortunately, these positive measures are being lumped together with some very unreasonable, harmful, and regressive measures that we cannot support. Mr. Speaker, like the omnibus bills before it, C-31 includes corrections to mistakes in previous budget bills. Mr. Speaker, for the people of Etobicoke North and for young people across Canada, Bill C-31 offers very little. My constituents and Canadians need better, and they deserve better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question et commentaire. L'honorable député.